Welcome to Wednesday Q&A, where you all ask the questions and we answer with joy and humor, hopefully. I am joined as always by my fearless co-host, Kristen Williams.
Hey, Laura. Hey, everybody. So good to be here. Let's go ahead and kick it right off.
Kick it right
Um,
off.
we got a question sent in to our support at lateyoga.com. So don't forget, you can always do that. And this is from Sarah Young. She said she had 4 COVID shots in the same arm and a flu shot over the span of a year plus. Removal of lymph nodes requires shot in only one arm. The second COVID booster shot in March left my arm with a slight impingement. I've had a hard time raising my arm from the front, not the side, without painful ache. I've tried percussion massage, and strength training. Nothing seems to help. Anyone else have this issue with vaccinations? Any thoughts for remedy or just wait it out some more? Thank you in advance. I think we're going to be hearing a lot about this especially with COVID vaccines now that everybody or most people are getting them. But this is something that actually is not uncommon. We used to see this a lot with the flu vaccine. And so in her case, having lymph node removal, she always has to get them in the same side. A lot of times we will ameliorate that by switching sides. If you have to get a vaccine, you get it on one arm one time and then the other arm the next time. But in her case, a vaccine is, I guess I'm starting off since I kind of dove right in, but a vaccine is a small amount of the virus. So we will see it's not uncommon for these viral injections to sometimes cause an autoimmune response. I have seen it on a handful of occasions, just not for myself, but for patients and family members. People develop like a frozen shoulder or start to develop frozen shoulder symptoms after they get an injection. And it's the body, the reason we get vaccines is for our body to actually start an inflammatory slash infectious process. And then the body produces antibodies to fight this off. And that's how we can develop an immune response. Therefore, when you get or might get the actual flu or get the actual COVID virus, it's not as bad because your body has already developed antibodies towards it. However, we do have things or instances where the body might overreact. And we say overreact, I almost hate to use that term because nothing the body does is usually wrong. But sometimes the way our body responds to things might be hyper or hypo responsive. And so our body has a hyper responsive reaction, perhaps particularly in Sarah's case, with having it in the same arm, 4 vaccines plus flu in just over a year. So we'll say 2 years or less. That's just a lot of viral infection, even though a tiny little dose directed into the same area could have started an inflammatory hyperimmune response, autoimmune response, which could have developed or have her starting to develop signs of impingement. Impingement is inflammation within a joint. I would be interested to know how her range of motion is. A lot of times we'll see this adhesive capsulitis start, which by the time you feel pain or quote unquote impingement, you've actually lost some range of motion because the body just starts to tie down. So, what to do about it? Usually what I've had people do when they, say to me, for example, my father's, this was several years ago. He was like, Christina, I got this flu shot and now I'm getting ready to go play golf. And I just feel like my arm just doesn't feel like I have the swing. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. I sent my dad like 5 or 6 stretches to go right ahead and do, almost nipping it in the bud. I had him doing just your traditional, overhead stretch, like a hang from overhead, reaching behind, a little like a tricep stretch. If you're watching me on YouTube, you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Reaching up the back, coming into some extension and internal rotation, coming across the body, a posterior shoulder stretch. Whether he needed it or not, you know, pendulum type motion, motions, anything to help flush out, that virus and that, that little viral injection, and also flush out any inflammation you might have. We recommend doing that anyway after you have a shot. So this is my PSA for people. Whenever you get a booster of any type, shingles, flu, COVID, whatever, move that arm like crazy that day. Not only does it help with soreness, but you're going to help flush that into the system. And I think flush out, my opinion, and I don't know that I have any medical backing to this, other than I know it makes it hurt a whole lot less. Flushing out perhaps some of that natural inflammatory response of the body. Laura, what else do you know about that?
I think you covered it. I think that it's absolutely everybody is case dependent. There are people who have very adverse reactions. And it sounds again like you're saying in one arm getting all of those shots, your body was just having like a hyper immune response. But you have to separate that from like the pain you're feeling and realize that actually moving it is the best thing you can do at this point. So I would and you moving it is going to actually even be better than somebody doing something to it. I mean, I'm not against, I love myofascial, but you need to move and circulate the synovial fluid inside the shoulder joint itself. You need to make sure that you're moving so you're getting that kind of capsular glide so the capsule doesn't get sticky on the humerus that can turn into adhesive capsulitis or a frozen shoulder. But I would say just know that it will go away, but you can help the process and certainly help it not get worse by continuing to move it, even if it does feel like you feel pinch or pain. And normally I'm really particular about the shoulder not going into any pinching or pain because usually it's a mechanical thing that you might so make sure your posture is good, that your humeral head is already centrated, it isn't rolled forward, that closes down that space under the acromion. And yeah, do some of the things like Kristen said, hanging, circling the arm. We talked about this on a previous podcast, frozen shoulder. You could just literally follow our tips for that, but definitely move it. And, just kind of go to the range where it does feel a little uncomfortable and just breathe into that because you're trying to tell your nervous system, hey, you don't have to respond so dramatically, but then you need to help your lymphatic system. So I would also maybe get some lymphatic massage. This is where you can do it on yourself. Lymphatic massage from the neck down to the collarbone, above the collarbone, below the collarbone, and around the brachial plexus. Just gentle, but just helping, again, some of that viral load circulate and let it be taken care of more by the lymphatics. Lymphatic massage can really help with that.
I love that.
All right. Next question we have from one of our wonderful teachers, Ava. She, my own way yoga. She wanted to know, how did you, Kristen and Rana, meet? I love that. Most of you probably know Rana. If you don't, Rana is our director of education and programming. She's another senior lit teacher on the Laterally and helps out with, of course, teacher trainings. She's involved in that because of the education component. Overall, amazing gal. And we all travel to Europe together this summer, and we travel a lot doing workshops. So I met Rana about 9 years ago. She came to a free Lululemon class that I was teaching at. So anyone that is ever wondering how you can break into a new community, I get these questions all the time. I moved to another town. I don't know anybody. The studio is not sure they want to hire a new person. How do I get started? Well, you go and you offer teaching at different places. It doesn't have to be a Lululemon, but Lululemon, you know that people are going to be interested in yoga most likely. And an Athleta, it could be at a library or a church. It could be anywhere that people gather that might be interested. And so Lululemon had these free classes, and I was teaching one, and Rana came there, and she was like, I kind of like this style of yoga. So then she came to the studio, and she was probably there before you came. But KB can tell how she came there, but they both ended up doing the same training, which was, I think, close to 9 years ago.
2014.
2014, 8 years ago. Same training as my daughter, who was 12 at the time. And so, yeah, that was the start of our love story. And then they've been teaching at the studio. And then when we launched our online platform, um, started that, and then KB came on full time when she moved to Wisconsin. It was all kind of very organic and lovely.
Yeah, no, that was exactly Rana was definitely there before because I remember when I started coming, Rana would occasionally check in on like your Saturday class. So she was working your front desk
Mm.
a little bit. And I, you know, how that is. You're like, "Hi, I'm Kristen." Didn't really talk to her then. And then when we started teacher training, I remember being like, "Oh gosh," because Rana was like so just like she is, Rana is a caregiver and Rana is a take charge person. And so she very first day, Rana brought like 2 dozen vegan cupcakes. And I was like, oh my gosh, who is this superstar person? And a little bit, intimidated. That lasted very short. Rana and I hit it off right away, became bosom buddies. We both actually, to start teaching right out of teacher training was unusual. You only brought about 3 of us and allowed us to do that. Rana was one, I was one, and Eunice were the 3 people that we started teaching right out of teacher training. And so, as a new teacher, you become we became really close as a teacher training class anyway, as most do. But then kind of going through that fire of making up new classes and hello, teaching for the Laura Hyman, like it was like, the pressure was on, and Rana and I really leaned upon each other. And then, yeah, everything with Lit Daily started, and Rana even started with Lit Daily before me. And then I came on, and so we just again, I was working as a physical therapist, 3 kids, a lot less time, and then yes, the stars aligned, and everything happened to bring me on full time. And yes, we travel together, and it is truly Ron and I call each other yoga honeys. You're my yoga sister, my sister from another mister. So
Yeah.
certainly it has been a blessed friendship from the get-go. Yeah, for going on, it'll be 9 years.
Hmm.
Pretty soon here. Well, I guess 8 years coming up. Yeah, 8 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. And this is like such a good lesson for anyone who is, developing friendships or developing work relationships, and that you can have both. I think actually having both is so wonderful because we're all passionate about what we do and about what we believe in. And we're also supportive of each other. And it just, and then we can also talk openly about things that we need to work on. It's a really, really beautiful synergy. And I am always like knock at myself like, what did I do to deserve this? It's amazing. So yes, I feel super blessed.
So do we.
Yay.
We hit the lottery.
Yes, we did. We did. It's wonderful to get along, and you don't have to think that, having a work relationship or professional relationship doesn't allow for that. So much better when it does.
Yes.
Okay, next question is from Sammy. For the podcast, my pelvis is tilted laterally and puts a lot of strain on that sit bone slash hip slash hamstring. Constantly struggling keeping my pelvis neutral during pyramid, standing split, runner stretch. Any cues to lit up that area to hug it into neutral? You're not
Okay.
alone, Sammy.
I know. If you guys just watched me, I was listening to Laura read that, and I immediately uncrossed my legs because, Sammy's talking about having a tilted pelvis. And so what we don't know is, does she have a leg length discrepancy? Does she have scoliosis? What might be causing that tilt? Or is it truly tilted? This is, I like to call myself a recovered osteopathic physical therapist, where I made a lot of positional diagnoses where someone, oh, your pelvis is torqued, you have an upslip, you name it. I've really tried to reframe my thought process to be less static and knowing in my own body, we all have tendencies that will make things, and yes, we all have asymmetries too. And that's okay. Let me put that out there right away. It is okay to be uneven. I feel it in myself, different hamstring lengths, different hip mobilities, but where I find it is in what I do throughout the day. So I would encourage you, Sammy, to look off the mat and what you're doing throughout the day that might be, I would call that enhancing that, maybe not causing it, but certainly perpetuating it. If you may be like me, where you always sit with one leg hugged up, to if you look at me on the YouTube, I always want to sit this way with my right knee up into my chest. So I have to force myself to sit this way, and it feels super weird and it feels uneven in my pelvis. But that's because it's not my norm. I have to remind myself to either uncross my legs or cross the other leg because I might have a favorite leg. I have to remind myself not to always weight bear through one standing leg. There are all these things that we do throughout the day, that can perpetuate that. And then in the short term, I will kind of asking what you can do about it for myself. I'll go into that awkward position and I'll just kind of sit there and breathe. And I'll do some kind of, what we do in Lit, Laura, where we're doing sort of this movement practice, never pushing into an end range, never pushing into pain, but, kind of like we talked about with the second to last question, reminding my nervous system that I don't need to always go there. And can I just encourage that release either through my breath, certainly through movement? But my biggest thing is in changing habits. Laura, what else do you have to say about that?
I really echo what you said. Like, look at what you're doing off the mat. And then, everything you mentioned, Sammy, which isn't surprising, is like in a stagger position, you pyramid, standing L, that type of thing, where you are, your pelvis is neutral, but your hips are doing, one's in extension, one's in flexion. And that is where you will feel more of the imbalance because one side will feel really easy. And then the other, like Kristen was saying, the other, like bringing that hip up, feels really different. So I would always go above and below and see what you could free up above and below. You might be hanging on that side. So for instance, like Kristen was saying, like my tendency is to hang on my right hip. Hang on my right hip. That's where I carried my babies. That's if I'm standing and I'm getting a little, just like more lazy, I just kind of hang over there. And you better believe that is the side I have a hard time balancing on. It has a slower activation, but I also have a kind of bunion thing that wants to happen, and I'm using my correctos to avoid that. But that feeds up into it. Now, who knows what happened first, but it makes it even harder for my glute med and my stabilizers at the hips to really hold in. So look below and above, like Kristen was saying, when you're in a pyramid, don't think about going down, think about lengthening the spine and then shimming the ribs, freeing up the tissue that surrounds the rib cage that it also attaches to the pelvis. If you feel it in your sit bone, hinge deeper into the hip and bend the knee and just hug around the sit bone, all the tissue there, so that you're really creating activation in the proximal part of the hamstring, which will give your pelvis some stability, but will also be protective for the hamstring, will also help to engage the pelvic floor. So there's just noticing it on the mat, and it gives you like the view into what you're probably also doing habitually. And so like Kristen, I know that my right side is, behind the 8 ball compared to my left, but it's gotten better because I pay more attention to the other things, like how I'm sitting, how I'm standing when I'm just chopping vegetables or something, how I'm walking, not letting that kind of pelvis swing out and stuff like that. So it's not so much like, to your point, Kristen, like an upslip or a torque or anything. I think it's more that you just let it go more, on one side. One side is easier to kind of hang into. And that's usually the side that, if you have a knee bent or something, that's usually the side you kind of pull up. If I'm lying in bed, it's my right hip that I can externally rotate and kind of, like a tree on my stomach. And I have to remind myself, oh, you know what? That's the easy side. And that's the side that's already, it's not hypermobile. It's just not as wired to stabilize. So why should I try and make it less stable by always opening that hip? So just look at all the surrounding stuff and think again in these postures, especially when you're staggering. You don't have to go down into it, but how do you receive the energy up from the floor? Think of the femurs lifting up. I was describing this in a class recently, like a little stool. You would lift the stool legs up into the seat of the chair versus like hanging down into the stool legs. And that's what your femurs are doing. They're giving energy and support to the pelvis. So kind of look at all the different factors that can help. But no, like Kristen said, this is totally normal. We all have it to some degree. Some of us have it more because there's just been more of that habitual patterning in there. But it's always possible to improve the spectrum of balance.
I love it. You give the best analogies, like the stool legs. Where does that come from? Like that is a
I know, it's looking at a stool because I kept on saying, pull your femurs up in your pelvis. Well, that makes sense to me. But a lot of people are like, okay, well, what do you mean? And I'm just like, think about it. You can crush a stool by sitting down, or you can think about, hey, I want the stool legs to support the seat. And
it's a
that's what's happening.
no-brainer, but
Yeah,
it just
there we
doesn't pop
go.
in my brain like it does you. I love it.
Yes, well, it's imagery all the time. Can't turn it off. We love all of you and we love hearing from you. So please write us. No question is not going to be answered. It can be about our life, how we met, what we do in our daily life. It could be a biomechanical question, and we'll do what we can to answer anything. So please write us at support@lytyoga.com. That's LYT yoga.com. Or find us on Instagram.
You can find me at KVWilliams99 and Laura at Laura.Hyman. That's no U, it's Lara,
That's
Hyman.com.
Yes. And so write us, direct message us, and always, always share this with friends. And we love it when you subscribe and rate and review because we love hearing from you. And we like to know that we're making a difference. We love doing this, so we want to keep doing it. All right. And as always, we're pulling for
We're
you.
pulling for you.